Stacie Shifflett. Really, really enjoyed talking to Stacie. Great conversation, incredible backstory, what she's been through, and what she does. She just, decides to tell the bartender at the bar restaurant that they're not doing things right and she can increase revenue, and he hired her on the spot, told her high school principal to let her graduate early. Just incredible. And the way she approaches like these decisions is very, very interesting. I heard the term that she used called the queen of reinvention. She continually reinvented herself. She ended up buying a $50 million software company with no money, with no M&A experience. Fascinating journey. Now she brings it all together in something that she calls modern consciousness, and she helps others with it. But just an incredible 3-time author, by the way, incredible backstory. Her son passed away 1 month, never left the hospital. She was hit with a divorce after almost 30 years of marriage, just suddenly. I mean, she's had to rebound many times and reinvent herself. But it's fascinating discussion. I love these kinds of discussion. I love talking to people like this that get what they have. They turn it around. They make things happen. She says a lot of times the opportunities find her. It seemed to me for her, it would be the opposite, but she doesn't claim that. And now she shows others. Great conversation with Stacie Shifflett. I really enjoyed it. I know you will too. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Let's have some fun. Stacie Shifflett, thank you so much for your time. I'm very, very excited to talk to you. What does it take? What are the qualifications to be the queen of reinvention?
I didn't realize I was the queen of reinvention until I realized I was. So I just had a natural, just instinctually kind of reinvented myself every 10 years. And I think that it took not conforming to convention and not necessarily conforming to the path that others thought I should take, and
Hmm.
being bold and having some confidence in myself, a lot of confidence in myself.
But sometimes there's outside influences, Stacie, right? That we can't control, and they influence, they prey on our outcomes. And so when you reinvent yourself, you have to be aware and try to plan for these things as well. So there is a certain amount of planning, even fortune that occurs.
Well, yes, there is planning. There is having the mental faculties, I guess. And I'm trying to think. So one of the biggest things I did was do an acquisition of a $50 million software company without investing a penny. So how does that come about? That comes about, that particular instance, I wasn't foreign to it. I was a subject matter expert in that field. I
Mm.
had been in that field for quite some time. It was one of my reinventions being in that field. And I knew the company, and I just had a very strong intuitive hit. I was doing consulting work at a big government contractor, one of the large international contractors at the time. So I just had a big intuitive hit, which happens to me, right? I woke up one morning and said, I need to buy that company.
Wow.
And so I acted on it, right? I called the guy that owned the company and said, "Hey, I mean, I'd known him for a number of years and I knew they were all octogenarians. He was the youngest one, the only one that was not." And he said, "Well, that's great, Stacie, but we just listed with the broker." So I said, "Okay, fine." So I had to deal with the broker. And it took 9 months pushing a rock uphill, quite frankly,
Mm.
because they called us all kinds of names. I recruited somebody to join me in the acquisition. I walked into his office and said, "Hey, let's go buy this company." And he said, "Sounds like a great idea." I went back into his office the next day and said, "I'm serious." So he had the qualifications I did not, right? So sometimes in this world, when we're talking about conforming and planning, right, you know what
Mm.
some of the obstacles are going to be, right? I never graduated from college. He had an MBA. I didn't have any merger and acquisition experience, and he had a little bit of that. So we teamed up, and yeah, we did it. It took 9 months. We did it. We got one of the top. Everything was like top, 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 right? We got one of the top investment firms in the country. Everybody that we pitched the deal to wanted in. We selected who we wanted to work with, and yeah, the rest of that was history. So, in a way, there's a funny story that happened after that that's going to be coming out in a book I have being published, which is what happened after that,
Mm.
right? So, what happened after that? What do you think might have happened in the first meeting with the new CEO that the investors brought in? Um, because I didn't have any experience running a company that size, nor did my partner at the time. So, what do you think the first thing that happened was?
Reorganization.
Well, did a really good job of getting them to keep the company intact because I also knew a lot of the people, right? So
Mm.
it wasn't that. I walked into the first meeting with the new CEO, and he had a nice org chart all made up. And I looked at the org chart and I'm like, I don't see my name there anywhere.
Hmm.
And he looked at me and said, "Well, I don't know what to do with you." And it went something like this. I looked back at him and said, "Well, that's kind of funny because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me, because all of
Mm.
that was my idea. And secondly, you do know what to do with me because I negotiated an employment agreement with the people that purchased this company, and you know exactly where I'm supposed to be on that org chart." And I got up and walked out.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't, he said later why, but I didn't have my degree. I didn't have the quote qualifications that he thought, I guess, were necessary. He was a bit perplexed by that.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, I got my position. When they flipped the company in 5 years, I took my money and got out.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good
So
for
yeah,
you.
so there are surprises along the way, right? But to your point of planning, I had negotiated a very good employment contract, right? And our portion of the company that we earned through doing this deal was sweat equity,
Hmm.
and also a good job, right? A good paying job. So
Yeah, fascinating. You talk about you can't plan for stuff. Yeah, you had a child that died after birth.
yeah,
Your divorce really turned you in a really different direction, kind of set you on this path of personal development. But these are two things you couldn't control, but really molded the way you are now, Stacie.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
To the better.
Oh, by far. Yes, by far. The death of my first son That was tough. And I call that really the way I describe that is experience. That experience is going to hell, and I was very fortunate to escape that hell. And my ex-husband, I was married at the time. Of course, he helped, and my parents were there, and all of that. But my doctor recommended that I go to a grief counseling group, and I went once. I only went
Mm,
once. And in that group, which oh gosh, there were a number of parents in there, and they had lost children of all ages from a variety of reasons, right? Mine died at a month at a month old in the hospital. He never made it home from the hospital. There was all kinds of stuff, and he was going through open heart surgery and did not survive the surgery, which they had not prepared me for. They told me he'd be
mm,
playing football in high school, but that's another story. But in this group, one of the gentlemen spoke, and it had been 5 years since the death of their child. And his wife was still unable to leave the house to go do simple things like go to the grocery store. And I've got goosebumps just telling you that. And I can understand that completely and have a lot of compassion for that. But I sat there and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this
mm.
for the rest of my life. I don't want to be in that place for the rest of my life. And I did have good support. I had a good job at the time. As I said, my ex husband just announced one day we're going to a 4th of July party, and that's it. You're going, you're leaving the house. I said, okay. Um, but I knew I needed to move forward. So there was that internal calling of not wanting to, being aware, right? I think everything is about awareness, being aware that I didn't want to stay in that space. So we have to make conscious choices and decisions sometimes, and sometimes those are hard, and we do the best we can to move ourselves forward.
You have a great story, Stacie. How you're fascinating. You were in a bar and you told the owner, bar restaurant, that you're doing everything wrong here. I could make you more money, and he hired you on the spot.
I did that when I was oh gosh, I was barely old enough to be drinking, let alone be working at a bar. I did. That was my first career, was about a decade in the hospitality industry, which is a nice
Mm.
way to say I was waiting tables and tending bar. But
Hmm.
I walked in and said, hey, I know your clientele, I know this place, I'd been a customer. I had come out of Washington DC. This was in a more rural area in Virginia. I said, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Let's take a look at your menu. We can do this, we can do that. And he was like, okay, well, you're hired. And
Mm.
that's where I stayed for, I don't know, two years at least, maybe three.
And he hired you. You raised revenue. Why leave that? There's only a certain ceiling there.
Just other paths in life, right? Just
Hmm.
other paths in life. From there, I picked up, and gosh, what did I do? I needed a change for some personal reasons, and I decided to pick up and move to Killington, Vermont. I didn't know anybody. I had never been to Vermont. And my parents were very supportive of pretty much anything that I did, even if it disagreed with their way of life. They were
Mm.
teetotalers and I was a bartender, right? So they loved to be through all that and accepted it. Back in those days, oh gosh, in the 70s, it wasn't, I don't ever remember it being like it was today, right? Where it's a respected career, right? Like it could be a respected
Mm.
career. I don't remember hearing any of that back in the day. Um, but yeah, they supported me, and I got in my vehicle and drove up there and got a hotel room, and same thing, sitting at a bar, talked to the manager, worked my way into a job, found a place to live, and I took a working vacation and cocktail waitress and did coat check and tended bar and skied for the winter.
Hmm. Incredible. But I don't know anybody who went to the high school principal and said, "You want out of here. You want to graduate a year earlier."
Yes. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, when my parents got a call from the principal, yeah, I got home and they were like, "Well, your principal called today." And I was like, "You did?" And they're like, "Yeah, he said you're going to quit school if we don't let you graduate this year." And I had tons of, I had all the requirements done. So they made that happen. Yeah, they made that happen, and I did. I graduated a year early, just like I went to work at 16. Right? They didn't want me to go to work. Middle class family doing better than their prior generation. The
Mm.
best. I was an only child. Trying to provide the best for their family. And yeah, I came home and said, "I need you to sign this employment thing so I can go to work." And that was at 16 years old. So
Yeah, and then you went to college, but you left it because you were making money.
yeah, I thought I was making pretty good money. So, so I quit. And and I did another career change when I got married in 1983. I was like, well, I don't guess this is probably the best working schedule, right, for a new
Mm.
marriage because I was working nights and weekends. And I tried to get a job and I had some difficulty. Again, my mom helped out in that she talked to a lady at church that had a very small 8A, minority owned government contracting company in the Washington, D.C. area. And I didn't have any computer experience to speak of or what have you. So, anyway, she hired me to do some bookkeeping and taught me the word processor. And oh my gosh, I was there for less than a year. She was a small company. I kept learning. The few people she had kept leaving, and I kept stepping up. So, within a year of starting in that position, I rolled out the first IBM PC XT, if you remember those days, desktop computers to the entire Department of Health and Human Services. I had a technical team that put the machines together, that was under a different contract, but I designed all of the training classes and delivered all of the training to the entire department and provided all their technical help, their help support as far as applications, not hardware oriented, but all the
Mm.
applications.
Mm. Again, another direction you ended up. I mean, you find these opportunities and you seize them, Stacie.
I do. I kind of create them in a way.
Mm.
Some of
Mm.
these I created, and I'm very in tune to what I think I should do next. That's how I ended up here in Sarasota. I woke up one day and I was years into my own personal development and my personal journey after my divorce. And I woke up and I was like, I need to move to Sarasota, Florida. Now, I was born in Miami, but we left Miami when I was very young. So I literally had to look at a map and figure out where Sarasota was. And within 2 weeks, I was on a plane and had a realtor and came down and bought a
Incredible.
house. And here I am. My assistant says it's even funnier from her side because she's like, oh my God, she's really doing this. I just made it happen.
When you make a decision, Stacie, do you make it and then just live with the consequences, or do you regret? I should have thought about that a little more, a little less. How do you make decisions? What's your process?
Um, It's probably varied some over the years, right? Like this, living here in Sarasota, I just made the decision buying the software company, doing that acquisition. I just made the decision. Um,
Hmm.
Knowing I needed to change jobs, I just made the decision. We decided when I was married, when my son was born, that we wanted to move out and raise him in a country setting, right? More rural. So I did some research there to figure out what I wanted to do on this 40-acre farm. And I decided to raise llamas, which I did for probably about a dozen years. And I trailered them and showed them and sold them all over the country. But I usually just decide and then I figure it out. I
Mm.
just figure it out.
What's the worst that could happen? Do you ask yourself that when you have to figure things out?
I don't usually look at the worst side. I always look at the
Mm.
best side.
Hmm. Your Instagram is really it's terrific, Stacie, and, no
Thanks. I love it
matter
too.
yeah, your team does it, yeah. All change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and so gorgeous at the end.
It is. It is. I think, when I was going through my divorce, one of the, and that shattered me. I mean, I made the decision. It's like that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. That's it. But my mantra through that time was, all right, if I could survive the death of my first son, I can surely do this. But I tell you, it really knocked me sideways. And I
Mm,
think, when you're in your 50s and you think that, I mean, I thought I knew what my future was going to be, right? I
mm,
figured we would be retiring or traveling more or working less, or that we'd be doing these things together. And, all of a sudden I found myself alone. And I don't have any regrets over the path that I took because it brought me exactly where I needed to be and where I am today. But the first couple of years was difficult, and this may be something that your audience might be interested in. I was doing all of the things that I thought needed to be done, and a lot of them I did, right? I had a company that was doing well at a construction company in DC. Another one of the things that I did that was
mm.
my business, and got a home, and was out socializing and so on and so forth. And it really started. It really occurred. I just couldn't shake the anger, I guess, is the shortest way to say it. And I got tired of being angry, and I reached out for help. And I'd had a therapist a little bit, but I reached out for help from someone that did was more spiritual in nature, did some energetic healing, worked with energy, let's say.
Mm,
And I remember walking into her office, and she said, "What brings you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm tired of being pissed off, right? I'm angry." Now,
mm.
anger is awesome in that it fuels you to move forward,
Right.
and it can be a great motivator. And it was for me, and I had the wherewithal to realize that I wasn't really going in a direction at that time, right? I mean, my company was running. I was, had a very active social life, we'll say. And but I couldn't see my future, and I realized, just like through the rest of my life, really, I had to create my future. It
Mm.
was in my hands, not really in anybody else's hands.
You got yourself here, and now you're going to continue to move yourself along. You're not gonna depend on outside forces. You're going to just take control yourself. This is your attitude? This was your attitude?
It is, and the forces that I rely on are, the universal forces,
Mm,
universe or God or, creator, whatever that you would like to call that energetic being. I believe we all have a connection. I believe we're driven to things. I believe in soul paths. It took me a very long time, but honestly, this is funny, but it is a true story. I don't have contact with my ex-husband. It just works better that way.
mm.
Um, and it's like, oh gosh, where was I going with that thought? Um,
About outside forces helping you.
yeah, they do help a lot. And I believe that I truly believe that in some of the ways that I have been directed have come through those forces. And I think that we all know when we get those really strong intuitive hits, which I've probably used that terminology a few times here, but it's such a strong inner feeling. It's like, where does that knowing come from? the idea for the company that I have now, Modern Consciousness, never in a million years. This information flowed through me through meditation. The idea for the company, the levels of modern consciousness, the different aspects of modern consciousness. So I've probably been slower to pull the trigger on this than I have been on anything else.
Hmm.
It was interesting to be receiving and capturing all this information, which I did capture. I write a lot. And I'm like, where did this come from? So the universe never tires of helping us grow, right? There's always new levels. And at this point I was, at least 8 years into my personal journey. But I really resisted the idea. It was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if at my age I want to start a new business. I kept saying, I'm not your girl, right? I don't know who this
Mm.
is for, but it's not for me. I'm not your girl. I can't do this. And it just persisted. The idea persisted. And when I say persisted, I don't mean it popped into my mind once every few weeks. It was with me always.
Mm.
And so I was again meditating one day and I said, all right, fine. You're not going to leave me alone. And this is the way I talk to spirit. It's just,
Wow.
they accept us like we are. So I'm like, all right, you're not going to leave me alone. So what is it that you want me to do? And the voice said, write. One word, write. I said, okay, you've told me that before. But the difference was I surrendered. I said, I will. I surrender. I will do it. I don't know where this is going to go, but it was consuming me, right? So within an hour, I got a text message from a friend that said, hey, I've got a friend doing a compilation book with Les Brown. She's got a chapter open in it. Would you like to join the project? So how could I say no?
Mm.
Right. So I do believe that when we start down a path, with good intention and awareness and heart, I think doors open for us. I think, we
Mm.
don't see everything all at once, but um, it evolves and a path evolves for us to follow. I know what I was going to tell you earlier. Forgiveness is a big thing. I work with some women that have been divorced, after long marriages, and forgiveness is always such a funny thing. But when I was talking about soul paths and soul contracts and things that I believe, I swear that when I get to the other side, right, when I go through those gates, my ex is going to be standing there shuffling his feet and his eyes down to the ground. And he's going to go, hey, really sorry about that. But we kind of had an agreement. And I'll be like, yeah, I know. I know. It's
Hmm.
okay. Because none of this would have ever happened either had that marriage continued.
Mm.
None of this would happen. And I had to get past a little bit of that too, going like, I wouldn't be doing this if I was still, you hold on a little bit to what you thought was going to be your future. And then you just have to let it go. It's just not.
Mm.
You have to be fully present, which is I'm very gifted in that regard. I can be fully present with what I'm doing. And you have to be forward looking.
Yeah, forgiveness can be tough. Yeah, and holding a grudge and vendetta. I mean, it's just ends up just being poison, doesn't it? Doesn't it, Stacie? It doesn't move us forward at all.
No, it doesn't serve us at all. It doesn't serve us at all. Ourselves. If we are anchored to the past, and if we stay anchored in those lower vibrating negative emotions, it's very, very difficult to move forward until we start to unravel that a little bit. A little bit at a time is okay. It doesn't necessarily happen at the snap of a finger, but yeah, find your path forward.
Mm. I don't know who said it, but 90% of success is just showing up or right place at right time or something like that. And you seem to have a knack for that.
Yeah, I've had some blessings in that regard, and and just I've just followed my inner voice since I was very, very young, before I even really knew, I didn't really know what it was. And that's a lot of my theory. I think that when when we have a lot of worry and anxiety, and I'm not talking about things like in the clinical sense, right? I'm not talking necessarily about clinical depression, but when we're wrapped in living from within our wounds instead of within our future, we lose sight of that. And
Mm,
I think even when life appears very, very good on the outside, my first level of modern consciousness is Automaton 2.0, and it's a great level. It's absolutely necessary. And, but when the activities of our lives are the momentum, creating the momentum in our lives instead of us intentionally creating our momentum. So I think that we make a lot of decisions and we put a lot of our lives into play from earlier decisions, but we never really stop and rethink all of that again in a holistic way, right?
mm,
So, we're starting to get we have some financial success. You've got the house, the kids are enrolled in soccer, dance, you've got the new car, you just get busier and busier and busier. And then all you're doing is trying to keep up. And I think that little voice is within us and it starts to say, wait a minute, is this all there is? Is this really all there is? And I think that is the time, at that point we've built, a lot of people at that point have built a really solid foundation to springboard off of to the next phase of their life. And, wherever you are, that is where you need to move forward from. And
mm,
we ignore that voice until that voice, it gets louder and it gets louder, and then it starts screaming, and then it screams louder. And at some point we're thrown into chaos or crisis. And I believe that's because we ignore that, and essentially something is out of alignment with our values and what we really value in life. When that gets
mm,
out of alignment, I think that's when trouble starts happening. For lack of a better word, trouble. We still have to
mm.
learn our lessons through all that, but
And fail fast. No matter how hard the past, you can always begin again. Buddha, one of your quotes in your social media.
hmm we have to begin where we are.
Mm. We have to begin where we are. Explain that.
Well, I think, my divorce is a good example. I took care of the logistics, right? Took care of the, got a home, all of that kind of stuff. All the legal stuff was tended to. Um, so I had that foundation underneath me. And of course, I had, life experience, but I had to begin where I was, which was heartbroken, not engaging in we'll just say not engaging in the most, the healthiest behaviors.
Mm,
I was drinking too much, soothing the pain. But I was out and about and dancing and staying busy, right? Sometimes we stay busy just to not hear what's said in our minds in the quiet, because
mm,
sometimes we just don't know what to do with that until we do, right? And I think we have to start listening. I think when we listen to those little voices and go, and then honestly, we don't know how to do it. So how do we figure that out? Well, if the people in our network are not contributing to our growth, that's one thing to look at. That doesn't mean that they're a negative influence, but for example, if you're going through a divorce and your friend is,
mm,
constantly reassuring you that you are the victim in the situation, that just keeps you in a victim mentality. So being in a victim mentality, as you know, is not a
mm,
really healthy thing.
mm.
So even though their intentions are the best, it may not be the best for you. So, what we have to do, I mean, I think the biggest asset we have is peace of mind. Our biggest personal asset is peace of mind. The path to that is actually knowledge. So we have to gather knowledge that's outside of our current knowledge base, and that can be as simple as going to the bookstore, scanning books on a subject, and starting to read one, and that leads you to another one, or looking at a seminar, or if you need, get a psychologist. If you need a counselor to help you through that, find a coach that you like
Mm,
and can work with. um we have to seek something different. If we keep doing the same things, nothing new is going to happen. And we can't,
mm.
just like we didn't learn our alphabet or cursive writing. I don't think they teach cursive anymore. Don't get me started on that. But we have to learn everything, and that doesn't stop as we grow into adulthood, right?
Mm.
We need to unstick our ways from what we think we know, and we think we know a lot, and we do know a lot, but we have to we have to know more, and look outside of ourselves and our networks, and it will, whatever's right for you will resonate with you.
Mm.
Whatever's right for you at that time will resonate with you. That's the way I've found it to be with me, whether it's a person I reached out to, or a book I picked up, um, a seminar that I took. There's tons of stuff available, and it's been an interesting path. And again, once you start down that path, as I said earlier, you take a step, the next step appears. So you do have to be grounded in some faith that that next step will appear, and you'll know it because you'll feel it deep within you when you know it. It'll be a strong, it's not just like, oh, I think I want to take that seminar. It's more like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And then we start to build a knowledge framework within ourselves from which we can grow and expand and heal. No one
You know,
person has the solution. The solution is in us.
mm.
We just have to find, the right combination, to help us find the solution that is hidden within us. And that's what my coaching program is about. Elevate Your Life. It's in us.
Mm.
Just need someone to help you find it. I had people that helped me. I'm sure you've had some people help you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely, Stacey. And you're almost. I don't know if it's a blatant suggestion. There's no such thing as a blatant suggestion. I don't know if perhaps you're asserting that most of the time, oftentimes, the opportunity finds you. You don't find it.
It does. It works both ways. Yeah. But if you're seeking that opportunity, okay, so we're going to get into some of the fun, energetic stuff, right?
Mm.
If you are seeking that opportunity and set an intention, even before you go to bed at night, if you don't meditate, or all it sometimes takes is just 5 minutes of breathing, releasing the day, grounding yourself, and then setting an intention before you go to bed that I have this problem that I'm trying to solve. Can you help me solve it? Can you shine some light for me on how to solve it? And you'll be
Mm.
surprised, because you'll see something or hear something in the next day or few days or what have you. And when you pay attention to your awareness, you go, oh, I do. This happens to me all the time, right? And
Mm.
I'll have that, and it'll snap in, and I'm like, oh, and I look up to the sky, and I go, thank you, I got it, and then you have to follow through with it. That's the thing. You have to
Mm.
follow through with it.
So, Stacey, I started my business, a tech business. You were there for a while in the '90s, and I was working way too hard, and long days. This.
Oh,
Better
yeah.
than most, perhaps. Yeah. Not paying attention to myself, soda, pizza, eating too much. I got myself to 340 pounds. The doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. People ask me how. I always say discipline. Now, I've heard you mention discipline before in other podcasts and other conversations, but right now, as we speak, how does the discipline play a role in your life?
It plays a role. It plays a role in a number of ways. For one, I have, through discipline, trained myself to be hyper aware, for lack of a better term. And I say hyper aware in that I notice a lot of things, and I observe human behavior a lot. It's a hobby of mine. I enjoy it, and it just fascinates me. Human behavior, the world, and that's when I started my journey. That was my goal. I wanted to find out about my as much as I could about myself, but also the human condition in general. So I think making awareness a habit, right? It's
Hmm.
not a habit, so you have to be disciplined to create that habit. And then two things that are also still a habit that were very influential for me when I started my journey is not making assumptions. I really, really try to not make assumptions, and I'm
Mm.
pretty disciplined about it. I'll make one every once in a while, and then I'll go, oh, yep, nope, that's an assumption. Don't do that
Mm.
because we don't
Mm.
know. It could be anything. And that frees up a lot of mental space, right? When you're not making assumptions, because most of the time it has nothing to do with you anyway. So why bother? And the other is not being offended, noticing what offends you and understanding where that's coming from, really, because again, it's all in us. And that's where I think the knowledge and the training starts to help us. When we can start realizing that we have these subconscious beliefs, there's so much that goes on in our subconscious mind, and we're unconscious of it, right?
Mm.
So I've had the discipline for a number of years now, trying to expose that within myself so that I can then clear those beliefs and level up, right? And then the universe levels you up again anyway. So it's kind of the way it goes.
And had you always, graduating early, leaving college, I mean, the things that you've done, had you considered yourself disciplined at those points?
If it's something that I'm committed to and enjoy doing, yes.
Uh.
If I'm not, like sitting down to
Mm.
pay the bills,
Ha!
it's boring, right? It's so boring. But I have everything I can on auto pay, and I batch it, I minimize it, I make it as painless as possible, and I always feel really good when I'm done. But yeah, so I'm super focused and disciplined when I'm really, really interested in what I'm doing. I mean, I had to grow the careers and have the successes that I've had. And even the llamas, my
Hmm.
when I first got them, I was a city girl, and I can remember my mother standing out there, and I've got a baby that's stuck, right? And use your imagination. You've got the gloves that come up over your elbows, and I'm turning this baby and delivering this baby llama, and
Wow.
my mother looks at me and she goes, who are you? Where did you learn to do that? And I learned to do it because, like with anything, if you immerse yourself in it, you learn to do it. My ex-husband used to tease me. He'd say, my God, they have a sore toe, you call the vet. And I said, but that's how I'm learning.
Mm.
Right. And after a few short years, I only needed a vet on the farm if it was truly a medical emergency. I could
Mm.
tend to so many things all by myself. So it was the discipline to learn how to do it, I guess. Again, I was extraordinarily interested in it. It was a fascinating and lovely time of my life. I always wanted animals. was a great place to raise my son. They learn so much from animals, the birds and the bees and life and death and the circle of life
Mm,
and
mm.
compassion and, all of that responsibility. Um, yeah.
Stacie Shifflett, what motivates you?
What motivates me? I am powerfully motivated. I'm very motivated with modern consciousness and this
Mm,
company. For one, I really truly feel like it is a mission that was given to me to fulfill, to impact the lives of those that would be attracted to me and that I could impact, right? Because different people appeal to others. Um, and I'm figuring that out.
mm,
And I think the thing that most motivates me is to be at peace of mind, peace of heart. They're really one thing. Um, yeah, I think that's the be all end all, right? Because
hmm,
it even helps us. That's what supports us through even the most difficult times. And I like my peace. I have created a lot of peace in my life at this point, and I like it, and I intend for it to stay that way. And
mm,
that doesn't mean something bad can does it, might not happen. But I can deal with it and see beyond that in a bigger picture, I think. And I know to grieve through it as well, right? Sometimes, back to being present, sometimes you have to just be present with your grief. And that's the
mm,
best you can do at that time. And that's okay. So that's where the peace of mind comes in, right? And where the knowledge comes in. So to be able to realize that that's what you're experiencing and that it's absolutely necessary for you to experience it to move through it. So
mm,
through is the key word there, not staying stuck in it.
hmm. So then, how do you measure success?
Well, how do I measure success? I used to measure success by external things. And I think now I measure success by positively, by staying in my peace for one, but positively impacting the lives of other people.
Mm,
It's very fulfilling work. And yeah, I would have to say that's probably how I would define it at this point. If I'm in a place where I'm worrying, which I've released worry for the most part, I know something's wrong there, right? Because so I'll have to work through that and get back to it. For me, it's usually taking some sort of action. I had a realtor approach me on my home here back in the summer. It was not on the market or anything, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, well, wasn't really looking to sell." And but I told her, I said, "Well, let's meet because I've learned not to turn down an offer without
right.
understanding maybe what you're offering, right?"
Mm,
And so she came by and I was like, "Whoa, okay, I can't not sell if that's the value, I can't not sell, right? I'm gonna
mm,
I'm gonna sell." And then so I set about proactively figuring out where would I go, right? Instead of worrying about it, I researched the real estate market down here and other places, looked all over. It didn't come to fruition. The family that she was going to bring here found another house because of course it took a few weeks for all this to happen, and that was fine too, right? I had to get to a point where I was going to be fine either way, right? Either do the sale, take the money and figure out what was going to come next. Something was going to come next, and also not be attached to the outcome of selling the house for that sum of money that she mentioned to me because it was a large sum. So,
mm,
um, Yeah, being not attached to the outcome of either one of those. So I think that's very important, and I think that's what keeps us out of worry and regret.
Mm.
Worry for the future and regret from the past.
And does this all align with what you do at Modern Consciousness?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I have a program that I just love, and it's called Elevate Your Life. And I know you're all about discipline, and I say, well, evaluate your life to elevate your life. So
Hmm.
I find that people assess so many different areas of our lives routinely, but we never look at it all together. We do our annual checkups, or our we we monitor the performance of our businesses or our kids grades or our whatever. We look at all of these things, but we never sit down and look at all of it together. And that's what I do. I have people do we go through an assessment, and we're really looking at every area of your lives, and I ask a million questions, and I do it a little bit differently than some coaches, and people can reach out to me to find out about that. But just what is, what's working for you, what isn't working for you. But I look at all of the different domains of life, and then we sit down and go, okay, so what would make you happiest in this area? What are you
Hmm.
striving to experience in this area? Experience versus achieve, right? Some can be
Hmm.
achievements, some is just what you like to experience. And that's I call that aspirations, and that's really interesting because people have lost touch with their aspirations. It's very difficult to articulate that. And then we move into what I call architecting the bridge, which is acknowledging those gaps, and how what's going to move us closer, what's going to move you closer to the experience that you want to be, right? And the really interesting in there is we look at patterns, and I'm sure you probably found some patterns when you were going, you lost what, like 135 or so pounds.
Yeah.
And I'm looking where the exercise, the fitness, what have you, right? So
Yeah.
we identify patterns, and it's very difficult for people to see their own patterns sometimes. So I invite them to do that. And of course, I help them do that. But if you look at something, like I had a woman that's, oh, her business isn't, she's not generating the revenue that she wants to make. And it's not doing as well as she could. And she's too busy, but she can't afford to hire anybody to help. And it's just impossible. Well, it's not impossible. You know, she's experiencing overwhelm. And when we really got in and looked at it, she's also very easily distracted from what she's doing. And she also had, I like to level it all the way. It's one of the things when I was consulting, I did so well at. I'm really good at that 50,000-foot view. And it's like, okay, so there's a pattern here of yielding to impulses. You're not happy with your weight because you're yielding to the impulse to eat. Now it's stress related, but you're still yielding to the impulse.
Mm.
And you're buying too many luxury items, right? You're yielding to the impulse to spend. Again, both of those are very soothing behaviors, but they weren't contributing to the outcomes she wanted to create.
Mm.
So just understanding that at that level and how it impacted her health and wellness, her business, her finances, multiple areas of your life. And that's what I like to do, is try to look for these themes and patterns. And then it's like, oh, because, somewhere in, we know that somewhere in the back, but we just ignore it, right? It rolls around in the back of our head somewhere. So you start doing some of that work and put in some small steps, right? I try to look for something that's going to move them, help them find something that's going to move them forward the most. So that's a good example of not yielding to impulses is going to move her forward the most, right? So
Mm.
watching just her luxury spending for a bit, she had money to get a virtual assistant to help offload some of the work with her. And then she, could get less be more focused instead of distracted on having all these things to do of, assigning the virtual assistant some work, you know, being a little more mindful and disciplined, for lack of a better word, or your
Mm,
word, about her schedule and, where she was spending her time and money. And it made a huge change of moving toward where she wants to be instead of being frustrated about that day after day. And then we
mm,
keep telling ourselves stories, right? Oh, I can't afford it. No, I don't trust anybody else to do it. They can't do it the way I can. And, all that's all just noise. We just have to get beyond the noise and figure out what's creating that noise, right? Even when you play a record player, right? We'll go back. If you've got the needle on there, it's playing a noise because there's something on the turntable creating the noise. And if it skips, it's doing that because there's a scratch in the record, right? There's something on that's creating that outcome. So that's what I do and how I like to look at it.
I love your attitude. I love your story. And, many people, Stacie, would get these experiences that you've had and kind of keep it to themselves. But you decided to open it up and, let me show you what I did and to help you. I think that's the mark of an extraordinary person. And it's very cool.
Thank you for that. And it's super interesting that you say that too, because being seen is new for me.
Mm,
That's actually new for me. I was I actually had submitted a manuscript to Jack Canfield, and I had the pleasure of working with Jack Canfield and his gal that runs his company, Patty Aubrey, who I just loved, and Steve Harrison, who has a company for authors. And yeah, being seen and being the public face of my company was not something I really intended on doing.
hmm,
So I also was raised where you didn't brag, right? You didn't brag. So for me, they said something to me at the meeting, and I was like, "Oh, I know what you're doing." I said, but you know, to be able to claim and voice your successes, we can do that in a way. I don't necessarily think it's braggy when someone else, or boastful in an egotistical way when someone else has a big achievement. I applaud
mm,
them, and I'm like, whoa, those are the people I've been drawn to work with over the years, right? But it wasn't working out that way for me so much because I thought, oh no, that's just. So I've still overcome. We're continually working on ourselves, right? it's
mm.
it's it's refining and fine tuning and growing through our experiences is what elevates us to the next level.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. Well, Stacey, absolute pleasure speaking with you. I was very excited when, we decided to do this. If anybody needs to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, they can. My social is all under Modern Consciousness, right? So it's Modern Consciousness on Facebook and Instagram. There is a free ebook that you can get on my website, and that website is modernconsciousness.com. And you can email me at empower@aware.life.
So cool. Thank you so much, Stacy. Next time I'm in your neck of the woods there in southern Western Florida, we'll get a cup of coffee.
Absolutely. I would love that. Yeah, because you're not far from me at all. That would be
Not
very,
at
that
all.
would be a lot of fun.
It would be fun. Stacy, thanks again. You be well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.